Hi everyone, it's Michael Citron for another edition of our Ask Michael Monday. It's our 50th episode, and I'm really excited to have Ken Cutler on. Thank you for coming on.
Of course.
Commissioner Cutler.
Thank you.
He's our 50th episode here, and he's going to discuss a lot of cool things. So Ken's a longtime resident and friend, and I appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so why don't you introduce yourself and tell little people about why you love living in Parkland and just a little bit about your history and your family.
Okay, well, I'm actually a native Floridian. I was born and raised in Hollywood, Florida. Grew up here, went to Hollywood Hills High School, attended the University of Florida Go Gators, where I met my wife, Sharon. Came back down here and went to Nova to attend law school, and I've been operating as an attorney now for the last 31 years. Currently own my own business, Cutler Law Firm, with my partner who is also a Parkland resident, Andrew Rader. We moved to Parkland in about 1997, I think it was. My kids were young. My wife and I were trying to figure out exactly where we wanted the kids to be going to school, had heard some great things about the Parkland schools, and so we decided that we were going to look at it. Interestingly, Cypress Head at that time did not have a guard gate.
I remember that.
And so we would drive in and go around the circle, and then on the holidays and stuff, it was so festive and beautiful in there that we fell in love with it, and we were hoping that one day we would be able to stretch to kind of find a place there, and ultimately settled there.
You're still there? And
we're still there.
Wow.
It's been wonderful.
That's great. I love Cypress Head. It's a great community. We'll get right into an important question. Everything, we're in real estate, as you know, and the big item that everybody's talking about is school safety, the safety of our city. So one of the things, and I've asked all the other commissioners that have come on and on our Ask Michael Monday show, the one thing that the commission does have the vote on is to elect who will police our city. So Broward County Sheriff's Office is currently policing our city, and that contract expires next year. I know an independent investigation is being done. What is the status of that investigation? And do you feel that the Broward County Sheriff's Office should police our city moving forward?
So it's a very good question. It is a question that we as commissioners take very seriously. We decided that this is such an important question because it raises several issues. Lots of people have asked me questions like, should we have our own police force? Should we go with the Broward Sheriff's Office again? Their contract is up next year in 2019. Should we perhaps reach out to some of the other cities like Coral Springs and maybe utilize their police forcing? We reached out to an entity called the Center for Public Safety Management. They are conducting an independent study for us. They're analyzing all of our policing. They're looking at safety issues not just the schools, but also all the public areas, including the parks, including the public buildings and all of those kinds of things. And they have been studying that for a while now, and we expect to have a report from them sometime in January. This is a decision that I take very, very seriously. Public safety and health and welfare are the things that I look at predominantly in making my decisions on what to do when I'm sitting there as a commissioner. This, of course, is very high on that priority. As you probably know, my wife Sharon is a school teacher at Stoneman Douglas. Was there when the shooting occurred, and so these issues are, of course, in the forefront of my mind. I can't make any decisions yet on exactly what we're going to do relative to policing because I am waiting for that report. Okay. Until unless I have an opportunity to really dive into exactly what it is we need, it would be almost impossible for me to say what we can do. So that's kind of where I stand on that. I'm waiting to get that information so that I can make a fully informed decision on that. I agree, and we talked before we got going, I agree that there are lots of issues relative to the various police agencies that are problematic. I can tell you as a Parkland historian that this is not the first time we've had a go around on a decision on which police force we're going to go with. You'll recall a while back we actually had our own police force. The Parkland Police Agency was a hot button debate amongst commissioners at the time that we switched over to BSO. This was, I think, early during Michael's tenure as a mayor, very early on, and it was a real hot button issue. People came out on both sides on whether we go with the police or whether we go with the sheriff's office, and so now we've kind of got that in reverse. I can tell you that some of the issues that came up back at that time were things like the cost of what the police would be. We had issues relative to their pensions and things like that were taxing the coffers of the city. And so those are all issues that we're exploring and looking at as a commission.
And you said that the city's still paying pensions from that.
Yes, that's true. There are actually a couple of police officers who are currently actually on the force for the Broward Sheriff's Office who were formerly Parkland police officers.
That's crazy. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a big buzz topic that people are really looking at, and I think it's, you say in January they're going to have some of the reports, that exploration. I think it's important. I hope the city invites the city residents and members of the community to come out, because I think it's really important.
Yeah.
I mean, I think people are really buzzing because we talked earlier about, you look in Parkland and people's perception is not always reality, and you're giving me a lot of information, which I appreciate, because I sometimes go with perception as well. You have to.
Yeah.
I mean, we see a lot of police officers in our city that I feel might be in the retirement ages. We don't have a lot of young, tough cops, and you were telling me that there's a shortage of police officers that are applying for to be police.
Yeah, that's a problem that's endemic actually across the country right now. There's a decrease in people that are applying for the position, and so a lot of the forces are having difficulty filling those spots, and so that's something that's weighing on not just our city, but many of the municipalities in the area are having that difficulty, along with the counties all across the state are having that difficulty. So it's something that we're hoping will change. It's going to take time to get that done. I know that we are waiting for this report, so that'll help. And you mentioned the idea that you hope that we have public input.
Sure.
I want you to know that this commission, this Parkland Commission, is very tied to the idea of having public input on lots of different things. You'll know from the charter school issue that was before us, and from the last budget hearings that we had lots of public input, and we welcome the idea of people giving us input so that we can make decisions that are based upon what our people's desires and needs are.
Sure. Will this investigation report be able to, or is the public going to be able to see the whole report? Do you know that?
That's my understanding.
Okay. Because I think it should be.
Yeah.
Taxes, big issue. People are, and another misconception, and you're here to educate me as well, so I'm sure a lot of residents are unaware of it. Talk about the increase in taxes. The misconception is people still believe it's 20%. It's not. You've informed me. We have this little chart that you brought, and I'll hold it up as you explained to the public. The 4.8% increase did not happen, and you said it was a 4.4% increase.
That's right.
So big difference than the 20% that perception has been, so that's the actual report. You can take a look at it, the graph, to see the differences in cities, to show that Parkland's still very low millage rate. Mickey always talked about that as well when he was mayor. So if you'd like to explain that.
So Parkland has always been one of the lower millage rate cities in across the county. And we had a strategic planning meeting early in the year. There were lots of different things and ideas that came out of that with capital improvements and things like that. As you know, our population right now is guesstimated to be around 31,000 people. It's estimated in the next 5 years to push up to somewhere in the neighborhood of between 41 and 45,000 people. That's a direct result, of course, of the new developments that are coming in, and you probably know that better than I do with all the home sales that you guys are doing. So when we look at the capital projects, and we also look at some of the other things that we're dealing with the increase in population, like the need for additional police officers, the need for additional firefighters, improvements to our parks, and streets and drainage systems and all kinds of other things. The multitude of capital projects and the need for these things, like the policing and the fire, have really put us in a position where in order for us to effectively get things done, we needed to raise the millage rate. And as a result of that, the millage rate, of course, brings in money so that we can go ahead and do these capital projects.
Okay.
And that's the purpose of the increase. The result of the increase to 4.4% is a 10.3% increase in the taxing rate in the city right now, not a 20% increase.
Okay. So I understand that it's not a 20, and I saw some of the articles in Parkland Talk. So obviously, it's not that high. It's actually, and then you see the chart that I put up. It's actually low. Real quickly, in regards to the charter school, that was approved. Do you see any effect negatively on the traffic? Because that's what everybody who's living in Mar-a-Lago, Town Park, Parkland Golf, that area, people are telling me, they're a little concerned that that's going to affect their values. It's going to affect their drive. It's going to affect their overall, enjoyment of the city.
Yeah. So I don't know if you had an opportunity to attend some of those meetings. That charter school meeting, the first night went to about 4 o'clock in the morning.
I saw that.
But what they presented to us was a number of features to the school that were going to take away the traffic problem, because they were going to have a lot of stacking on their property itself, so that cars that were coming in to drop people off were not going to be sitting out on the roadways like we see at some of the other schools, but we're actually going to, they likened it to what happens at Disney World, where they have lines wrapped around and stuff like that, so that the cars could sit on the property instead of in the roadway. That would help to alleviate that. In addition to that, we've talked about other traffic situations, like where the exitway is to the country club. They're looking into actually building that into a circle. So that would enable cars to wrap around and to continue to move instead of stopping at the traffic signs that are there now. And that will help to facilitate better movement. Parkland is in a place right now where we're kind of in flux. We're having a growth spurt that was brought on by the wedge, which historically was a very important move by the commission. The commissioners at that time were looking at it because there were a number of things that were being talked about in that area, and by bringing it into the city, what they were actually doing is protecting our way of life, because it used to be Palm Beach County, believe it or not, even though it's on the other side of the canal. And as a result of that, Palm Beach would control its destiny if they desired to. So they could have put a garbage plant out there. They could have put an airport out there, and all of these things were things that were fought off by other commissions before mine. Now we've effectively taken it into the city, which means that the city has an opportunity to kind of control its growth, which we've done. We've held it to the lowest possible density that we could on a per acre basis. We get to look at and under our code make sure that the builders that are putting these things up are doing it in compliance with what our code requires and things like that. So those are all good, positive things. And of course, the difficulty is that infrastructurally, we're still in a place where the roads are not yet where they need to be. There are a number of things that could be coming in the future. First of all, we know that Loxahatchee Road is currently under a plan between the state of Florida, the county, and the city to build out the medians and put in turn lanes and to actually build bike paths and sidewalks and stuff like that. So that'll help with that congestion. As part of Wawa's coming in They agreed to give back some of their land so that we could have an extra left turn lane out there. So eventually when the road gets built out, it'll help to alleviate some of the problems with traffic going left, and that'll help the traffic flow as well. And as you know, the big property, the Hendricks Farm property that's in the middle of our city area, ultimately the hope is that, and Broward actually has it on their traffic ways plan, that Hillsborough Road will ultimately go all the way through that property. And so the east-west congestion that we're seeing
will be less.
Ultimately, once infrastructure gets built, will be a lot less.
City will look totally different in the coming years.
It will.
On different notes, you're really, as you said, you're a historian, and I love when you post or give me cool articles and cool little things that happened in the city years ago. I remember meeting the relatives of the Homburg family at that event that you hosted. Tell us a little bit more about the history, why you're so into it, and you're big into the Friends of the Parkland Library.
Yes.
And talk about the library. Just give us a little bit of insight of what you see for the future for the history of our city and preserving it, and talking about maybe about the fossils you found, and then it's cool. I mean, it's interesting.
So as an attorney, I'm going to object. Compound question, okay?
Excuse me. Throw me away.
No, but all right. So let's take the historical thing first. In college, my minor was history.
Okay.
So I've always been turned on by history and all of these things. And I got involved with the Parkland Historical Society some time ago. The Homburg Road thing was interesting to me because when the Parkland Historical Society came out with their history of Parkland, they talked about Homburg in the sense of being somebody that they didn't really know who it was. They thought he was a sharecropper in the area and stuff like that. And I started thinking to myself, how is it possible that they don't know who this person is? Right. So I've been, as I said, a history student for many years, and then I got involved in genealogy, where I was doing family research, and family research, genealogy is just another aspect of history, really. So I used those skills to try to really figure out who the heck Homburg was, because I needed to know who the namesake of that road was. And so in the course of my discovery, I developed a very amazing friendship with the members of the Parkland Historical Society. We ended up doing a great function that was actually co-sponsored by the Friends of the Library and the Historical Society to unveil the information of who Homburg was. It turned out that he was an interesting character. He had come to Florida in the 1920s. He had gone to school to be a dentist, but then he had fallen in with some land baron kind of guys. There was a guy by the name of Bolus who had come down to Florida and gotten the legislature at the time to allow him to purchase 500,000 acres at $2 an acre. But in return for that, he had to drain the Everglades.
Wow.
So he was the guy that started the process of building these canals and stuff, like the Hillsborough Canal. Sure. And the point was to try to drain the Everglades so that we could bring farmers in from other states to start, the whole agricultural thing. Mm-hmm. Homburg was one of the officers of Bolus's company. And ultimately, he purchased lots of land in the area. The Florida Fruit Lands Company, which you probably see on a lot of your deeds and titles and things like that, was actually the name of one of those companies. Wow. And so they were fruit farmers. Homburg owned lots of groves and stuff like that. And in fact, when I moved to Cypress Head in 97, my neighbor had 40 trees on one side of me, and the other neighbor had 30, and I had about 16 orange trees, that were part of the original groves.
Wow.
And if you look at some of the aerial photographs from the 1940s, you can see that the entire area is just completely covered with citrus and stuff like that.
That's interesting.
So Homburg was involved not just in the sale of real estate and stuff like that, but he actually got involved in a number of different corporate adventures, including being on one of the first entities that was responsible for making Port Everglades.
Okay.
And he was on the committee that broke the lake where Port Everglades is through to the New River to allow for the transport of goods from the New River to get out into the ocean and then to go back and forth. So that's what he did with his oranges and his citrus and all the agricultural stuff that's out in our area. He was one of the first guys to help make that happen and stuff like that.
It's very important. So when you drive down Hollenberg Road,
very important.
It's more important than you think.
So the Friends of the Library, when I moved to Parkland, there was a sign that was probably about this big that said Public Library on it. And this sign appeared where the fire station is now, but where the old City Hall used to be.
Okay.
And I drove around and I couldn't find the library. I couldn't understand it. I didn't see any buildings. I didn't see any signs that said library on it. Yeah. So one day I pulled into the City Hall and I said, where the heck is the library? And they said, you see that trailer out back? That's the library.
Wow.
So it turned out that Carolyn Marks had founded the original library at the concession stand that was at Quigley Park.
Okay.
Quigley, which is now a tennis center, used to be a park that had a baseball field on it, and they had built a concession stand there, and she was using that concession stand as the library originally.
I didn't know that.
Then what happened was they managed to get the city manager, who at the time was Harry Mertz, to make some phone calls, and he ended up being able to get an old used portable, which was a double wide trailer, to come over and use that as the library. And so they had all kinds of stuff there at that library. I walked into the library, met with Pat Markey, who was the first librarian there, the first official librarian. Wow. I found a flyer there that was talking about the Friends of the Library. So I showed up on another night, and there were 5 ladies standing around a table, and I walked in, and they asked me, can we help you? And I said, I'm here for the Friends of the Library. And they all basically got up and carried me over to the table.
Right.
So that was my original involvement with that. And then a couple years later, I became the president of the Friends of the Library. And I was fortunate enough to be able to be the guy that appeared before the city commission to ask for a library to be built. Because, we were an up and coming, very seemingly affluent kind of community, and yet we were having a library in a double wide trailer. It didn't make any sense. No. So I appeared before the commission at the time. Sal Pagliaro was the mayor, and Bob Marks was the vice mayor. And believe it or not, they said, yes, let's do this. And so a library was built. And so in 2002, we broke ground. And in 2003, we were cutting the ribbon for the brand new Parkland Library.
It's amazing. I didn't know all that.
And so I've been involved with the Friends of the Library. I was their president for almost 10 years. And then I've been involved, attending their meetings and in one capacity or another over the many years since that. It's a great group. The current president of the Friends of the Library is Kathy Kessler, and they're doing great stuff. Their goal is to raise funds and to help the library in any way they can. You should know that because of the increase in population, the commission has decided that the library needs to be expanded. Yeah. So there's an expansion in the process. We're hoping to be breaking ground on that within probably the next month or so. And hopefully by this time next year, we'll be opening the new wing, which will be dedicated to predominantly a kids wing.
Cool. I love the library. It's a great place.
It's a great place. Wonderful place.
They have a lot of cool stuff there. You should definitely go to the library, check it out. I know we don't get to go there as much as we want, but a lot of cool stuff. Ken, I appreciate you coming on and answering some of our concerning questions that the city has and residents have been gossiping about online. So I appreciate you coming out.
Of course.
Thank you so much for being our
the opportunity.
50th show member. I appreciate you guys coming on and watching our show today. You can watch it. We'll have more information. We'll post it below. And I hope you guys have a really nice night with your family. And be sure to check out our next week's episode of Ask Michael Monday. Thank you so much. Good evening.